I have driven the same route to Algonquin Regional Hospital 41 times in my life. I know this because I kept a small notebook in my glove box for 30 years, the habit of a man who spent his career as a land surveyor, where precision is not a virtue but a requirement. 41 times. Births, emergencies, my wife's final admission in the winter of 2019. I never once had to call a cab. I did not expect my prostate to be the thing that finally put me in the passenger seat of a stranger's vehicle. But there I was, 71 years old, climbing into an Uber in the October rain outside Algonquin Regional because my two children were busy, and my son-in-law had a conference call, and my daughter had something she was very sorry about. Welcome to Dad's Fierce Revenge. Settle in. This one matters. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Hit the like button, subscribe, and trust me when I say you are going to want to hear where this goes. My name is Clifford Marsh. I spent 34 years as a licensed land surveyor in Renfrew County, Ontario. I measured property lines for a living. I marked the exact boundaries of things. I was good at knowing where one thing ended and another began. I just did not realize I would eventually have to apply that same skill to my own family. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday in August. Prostate cancer, stage 2, caught early enough that my urologist, a calm woman named Dr. Okafor, who speaks with the measured certainty of someone who has delivered this news many hundreds of times, told me the prognosis was very good. She said the word manageable. She said it the way doctors say manageable when they mean serious but survivable, which is a specific kind of reassurance that lands differently at 71 than it might have at 45. I had a radical prostatectomy scheduled for October 4th. I told my two children 8 weeks in advance. 8 weeks. I want you to sit with that number. Not 8 hours, not 8 days. 8 full weeks, 56 days, during which a calendar could have been consulted, arrangements made, leave requested, a flight booked from Edmonton, a drive organized from Barrie. I told them both the same week I found out. I was sitting in my kitchen on Sycamore Crescent in Pembroke, and I called them one after the other, and I was careful and clear about the date, the hospital, the surgeon's name, and the fact that recovery would keep me off my feet for several weeks. I am going to tell you what each of them did with those 56 days. My son, he's 44, called me back the same evening. I could hear traffic in the background, the particular ambient noise of a man walking somewhere with his phone pressed between his ear and shoulder. He said, "Dad, that's not great news, but you caught it early. That's the main thing." He asked how I was feeling. I said I was feeling like a man who had just been told he had cancer and needed surgery. He said, "Well, you've always been tough." Then, with what I can only describe as seamlessly transitioned concern, he asked whether I had updated my beneficiary information on my RRSP since Mom passed. "Just something to think about," he said. "Just making sure everything's squared away." I told him my financial documents were in excellent order. I have been a surveyor for 34 years. Every document I own is labeled, organized, and filed in a cabinet in my study. He said, "Good, good." He said he would definitely be there for the surgery. He would work it out. My daughter is 40 years old and lives in Barrie, which is 3 hours from Pembroke, a drive I made dozens of times when her children were small and she needed help. She called me 2 days after her brother. She left a voicemail because I was out walking, which is something my doctor had encouraged me to do and which I had taken seriously. The voicemail was 4 minutes and 18 seconds long. I know the exact duration because I played it twice, not because it was comforting, but because I was listening for a concrete plan and kept not finding one. She was so worried. She was thinking of me constantly. Things at home were complicated. Her husband's schedule was impossible right now. The kids had activities. She would absolutely be there. She just needed to figure out the logistics. She used the phrase, "I'm there for you, Dad," 3 times in 4 minutes. I have lived long enough to know that people who are genuinely there for you do not need to say it 3 times. They simply show up. Then there was the son-in-law. My daughter's husband, a man I have known for 16 years. He is not a bad man. He is the kind of man who is very good at appearing devoted while being devoted primarily to himself, which is a skill I have come to recognize clearly if somewhat late. He sent me a text message. Not a call, a text. It said, "Thinking of you, Cliff. Let us know if you need anything." The us in that sentence has always puzzled me. Us. As though support were a committee decision requiring his co-signature. I want to tell you something about the morning of my surgery, because it is important, and I have not said it to anyone. I woke up at 5:45 in the morning in my house on Sycamore Crescent. The house was quiet in the way that houses in Pembroke are quiet in October, the wind off the Ottawa River working its way through the pines, a sound I have listened to for 23 years from this bed. My wife used to say it sounded like the lake breathing. She died in February of 2019, and I have slept on my side of the bed ever since, which tells you something about habit and something more about grief. I made coffee I wasn't supposed to drink. I sat in the chair by the front window, the one with the worn armrest on the left side where my elbow always goes. The street outside was dark and perfectly still. The Morrison's maple across the road had gone fully red in the past week, the particular saturated red of Ontario maples in October, that you don't quite believe until you're looking at it. I sat there and I thought, if something goes wrong today on that table, the last conversation I had with my son was him asking about my RRSP. And the last thing my daughter said to me in person was at Thanksgiving 2 weeks ago, when she hugged me goodbye in the driveway and said, "Call me if you need anything," and then got in the car and drove back to Barrie. I thought about that for a while. Then I called a cab, because I do not have Uber on my phone, and because sometimes a cab feels more dignified. The driver was a man named Preet, who did not try to make conversation, which I was grateful for. He dropped me at the main entrance of Algonquin Regional at 6:55, helped me with my bag, and said good luck in a quiet, matter-of-fact way that I appreciated enormously. I checked myself in. I handed my phone to a nurse named Beverly to hold during the procedure. And then it was October 4th and I went under. They kept me for 11 days. Prostate surgery recovery is not a small thing, regardless of what the discharge pamphlets with their optimistic diagrams would have you believe. There is pain that you were not told to expect. There is the particular indignity of a catheter, and then the management of its removal, and the entire renegotiation of your body's basic functions that follows. There is fatigue that is not sleepiness but something heavier, a kind of systemic depletion, as though the body has spent everything it had and is rationing what remains. And there is the chair. Room 214 had a green vinyl chair beside the bed. It was the kind of institutional chair designed to be wipeable rather than comfortable, and it sat empty for 11 days, except for the occasions when Beverly or one of the other nurses used it to set something down temporarily. I looked at that chair every morning when I woke up. I memorized it the way you memorize something that is causing you pain, because sometimes looking directly at the thing is the only honest response. My son called on day 1 and day 4. Day 1, he asked how the surgery had gone. Day 4, he asked whether I had a will in place. Not whether I was in pain, not whether I was sleeping, whether I had a will. I told him yes, I had a will. I had had a will since 1998. I was a surveyor. I understood the importance of documenting things clearly. He said, good, good. He said he was going to try to get up there. He did not get up there. My daughter called every day for the first 6 days, which sounds like devotion until you understand that each call lasted 4 or 5 minutes and consisted mostly of explanations for why she had not yet come, delivered with the careful architecture of a woman who has been assembling reasons for several days. The reasons were inventive. A stomach bug. Her youngest school concert, which turned out on closer inspection to be a rehearsal. A pipe issue at the house that her husband was dealing with. A work thing that came up on a Wednesday. On day 6, she said she was coming on day 8. On day 8, she sent a text. Dad, I'm so sorry something came up with the kids. We'll explain everything. Thinking of you. I read that text. I set my phone on the bedside table. I looked at the green vinyl chair. And I felt something settle inside me, not with drama, not with the sharp heat of anger, but with the slow, permanent quality of a surveyor's mark driven into frozen ground. Something defined. Something that would not move. On day 7, Beverly came in to check my vitals and found me reading a novel, a Patrick O'Brien I had been meaning to get to for 2 years. She was a woman in her early 60s, with the particular competence of someone who has been doing this long enough that competence has become warmth. She glanced at the green chair. She looked at me. She said very gently, "Do you have people coming, Mr. Marsh?" I said, "Yes, my family was just busy." She nodded in a way that told me she had heard this particular sentence many times before. Then she checked my blood pressure, adjusted the IV line, and on her way out she stopped at the door and said, "You press that call button for anything, even if you just want company. We mean it." I have thought about that offer every single day since. On day 11, Dr. Okafor signed my discharge papers, told me my pathology results were encouraging, and shook my hand with both of hers, which is something she did not have to do and which I did not forget. A volunteer named Gerald, a retired teacher who smelled of coffee and peppermint, wheeled me to the main entrance in the mandatory hospital wheelchair, which I have decided is both the most infantilizing and most quietly touching tradition in modern medicine. I thanked him. He patted my shoulders. I called a cab from the curb in the October cold. Preet again. I recognized the car. He recognized me. He said, "All done?" I said, "All done." We drove the 25 minutes back to Sycamore Crescent in the kind of easy silence you only get with someone who understands that silence is sometimes the correct thing to offer. He carried my bag to the front door. I thanked him. He nodded once, said, "Take care of yourself," and walked back to his car. I stood at my own front door for a moment before going in. I don't know exactly why. My hip ached from the wheelchair. I had a discharge folder and a pharmacy bag and a walker I had not yet admitted I was going to need. There was no logical reason to stand on my own porch in the October cold. But I stood there, looking at the door I had painted myself in 2003. The brass mailbox slot I had installed when we moved in. The small crack in the lower panel I had been meaning to fill for 2 winters. Then I went inside. My house was exactly as I had left it 11 days ago. That is a simple sentence. It is not a simple thing. When you leave for 11 days following cancer surgery, and you come back, and the house is exactly as you left it, it means no one came. Not to collect the mail stacking up inside the slot. Not to run the tap so the pipes wouldn't concern themselves in the cold. Not to water the spider plant on the kitchen windowsill that my wife brought home from Canadian Tire in 2016, and which has survived everything since, including me. No one came. I set my bag down. I moved through the kitchen slowly, the way you move when your body has been through something significant and is still in negotiation with you about the terms. I filled the kettle. I set it on the stove. I stood at the window and looked at the backyard, the birch trees along the back fence, the wooden bench I built when my grandchildren were small, thinking they would use it, the garden my wife kept, which I have maintained because I cannot bring myself not to. Everything exactly as I had left it. I thought about the green vinyl chair in room 214. I thought about Beverly asking whether I had people coming. I thought about the smile that cost me something I have not yet fully named. I thought about my daughter's text on day 8, the small red heart at the end of it. The particular casual intimacy of that heart from a woman who had not driven 3 hours in 11 days. I thought about what it means to love someone. I built things for my family the way I surveyed land, carefully, accurately, with attention to what was true rather than what was convenient. Not for applause. Not because I expected reciprocity in every transaction. Because love is not a service agreement, it is not something you invoice, it is something you show up for. I made my tea. I carried it to my chair by the window. The afternoon light was coming through at a low angle, thin and pale, the way October light in Pembroke goes thin and pale, like it's conserving itself for somewhere else. I sat with it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone. Not to call my son. Not to call my daughter. I called Harold Finch. Harold has been my solicitor for 22 years. He is a quiet man, precise in the way that lawyers who have been doing estate work for decades are precise, not fussy, just accurate. When I called him from my kitchen with my walker beside me and my pharmacy bag still on the counter, he listened without interrupting while I told him what I needed. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Clifford, are you sure about this?" I told him I had been sure since day 7. He said he would draw up the amendments. I thanked him and hung up and drank my tea. Outside, the Ottawa River light was fading over the tree line, and a neighbor's dog was barking at something down the street, and somewhere in the neighborhood someone was raking leaves. That dry, papery sound of October in Ontario that I have heard every autumn for 71 years. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a life that continued whether anyone showed up for it or not. 6 weeks after my discharge, I called both of my children and invited them to Sunday dinner. I want to be clear about what I was doing. I was not performing weakness. I was not setting a trap, exactly. I was doing something simpler and more fundamental. I was giving them the opportunity to show me who they had decided to be. And then I was going to remember it. I made a roast, the slow Sunday roast my wife made every December when the whole family came. I will not say more about that than this. Some recipes are made of memory, and I chose to be generous. I put on the radio, CBC, the afternoon classical program. I set the table properly. By every visible measure, I was a warm 71-year-old man who was simply glad his family had come. My son arrived first. He always arrives first, because arriving first is its own kind of statement. the statement of a reliable man, an attentive son. He came through the door with a bottle of Ontario Red, probably $25 from the LCBO, and the particular energy of a man who has rehearsed his entrance. He hugged me. He held it slightly longer than usual. Then his eyes moved across the kitchen, the living room, the shelves I built in 2001. The dining room table, the original hardwood floors, the fieldstone fireplace, a professional scan disguised as warmth. "The place looks great, Dad," he said. "It's the same as always," I said. "I know." He smiled. "I know." My daughter arrived 9 minutes later with a store-bought apple crumble and the expression of a woman carrying both genuine guilt and genuine relief in equal measure. She hugged me for a long time. I could feel the relief in it, the particular release of tension from someone who has spent weeks imagining a worse version of what they found. She sat down, and with the careful preparation of someone who had been rehearsing for 6 weeks, she began to explain the hospital. I listened to every word. She mentioned the pipe situation, her husband's conference, her youngest's ear infection, a work deadline. She said I felt terrible about it 4 times. I noted this. I said I understood completely. She exhaled. I put the roast on the table. After dinner, after the crumble, after the tea, I set down my cup and said, "I've been meaning to mention something. Since the surgery, I've been thinking about getting things organized. I've been working with Harold on some documents, just making sure everything is where it needs to be." The table adjusted. My son straightened slightly. My daughter's hands went still. My son-in-law, who had said very little all evening, looked up from his phone. "That sounds very sensible, Dad," my son said carefully. My daughter said, "Of course, you should. That's important." I picked up my cup and said, "More tea?" What followed unfolded over the next months with the steady inevitability of something that has been properly engineered. My son began calling every Sunday morning, not Sunday afternoon. Sunday morning, between 9 and 9:30, which is precise enough to be intentional. He asked about my health, my appetite, my recovery, my energy. He was warm and genuinely curious, and a very good son for about 12 minutes of each call, after which he would find a way to raise, very naturally, some practical question about the property. Had I thought about whether Sycamore Crescent was the right size for one person? Had I spoken to a financial planner recently? Was I keeping up with the property taxes? Just being practical, Dad. Just thinking ahead. My daughter began coming on Saturdays, not calls, actual visits. She would drive the 3 hours from Barrie, arrive before noon, stay until after supper. She brought groceries, the particular brand of coffee I drink, the Revita crackers I like, real food chosen by someone who had paid attention. She was good company. She has always been good company when she came. She would sit across from me at the kitchen table, and we would talk about the grandchildren and her garden and the books she was reading, and I would feel sitting there something I had not expected. Not gratitude, exactly. Grief. Grief for the version of my daughter who could have been sitting in that green vinyl chair on day 3 or day 5 or day 9, who had always been capable of showing up, who had been showing up all along, just not when it cost her anything. I drank my coffee and talked about the grandchildren and did not mention the hospital. Not once. My son-in-law sent a card, an actual card with a stamp, which I found oddly touching and privately too late. They called. They visited. They performed the attentiveness they should have given freely, offered now as something between penance and investment. I accepted every visit. I cooked. I laughed. I asked about their lives with genuine interest because my interest in their lives is genuine. It did not require my approval of their choices. I gave them nothing to defend against, nothing to apologize for, no sideways reference to those 11 days. The hospital had happened. I had absorbed it the way I absorb most difficult things, quietly, in my own company, with the particular self-sufficiency of a man who has been measuring ground alone for 30 years. I did not need them to apologize. I needed them to understand. And understanding, in my experience, arrives most reliably not through conversation but through consequence. The consequence was already written. Harold had the amendments. It is a Thursday in March now, 5 months since the surgery, and I am sitting at my kitchen table in Pembroke with the second cup of coffee I have allowed myself since Dr. Okafor cleared me for full caffeine. There is snow still on the ground, but the light has changed, the particular shift in Ontario winter light in late March, where you begin to believe, even before the evidence arrives, that something is turning. The birch trees along the back fence are bare and white and patient. My hip feels unremarkable, which after 71 years is the best possible thing a hip can feel. I walk every morning, 40 minutes through the neighborhood and along the river path when the ice permits. My energy is back, Doctor. Okafor's last report used the word excellent, which I have decided is the finest word in the medical vocabulary. Last month I made a donation to the Algonquin Regional Patient Care Fund. It was a specific fund for things like better chairs in patient rooms and warm blankets and the small dignities that make a hospital room less institutional. I made it in Beverly's name. I did not tell anyone. I did not need to. My will now contains 3 beneficiaries where 2 children's names used to be. The first is the Renfrew County Food Bank, because I have lived in this county for most of my adult life, and I know what the winters are like, and I believe in taking care of the people and the places you come from. The second is a bursary at Algonquin College for students in the geomatics and surveying program, because I believe in the trade that gave me my livelihood and my precision and my understanding that accuracy is a form of respect. The third is the Pembroke Humane Society, because my wife volunteered there for 11 years, and because some things should be continued in honor of who kept them going. My house on Sycamore Crescent, 3 bedrooms, the fieldstone fireplace I built in 1999, the birch trees along the back fence that have been there since before we bought the property, the garden my wife planted in 2004, it goes to the estate to be liquidated in support of those same 3 causes. Harold knows. Harold has known since October. Harold is precise and patient, and he will handle everything exactly as I have specified. There is one document in the file that is not a legal form. It is a letter. 1 page, written in my surveyor's print, the small clear lettering of a man who spent 3 decades making sure his measurements were legible in every weather. It is addressed to my son and my daughter, to be opened after. It says this. By the time you read this, you will have questions. I want to answer the one that matters most, because I was a surveyor for 34 years, and I believe in accurate information. I was in hospital for 11 days following my surgery. The surgery was on October 4th. I was discharged on October 15th. I came home in a cab. I told you the date 8 weeks in advance. I want to be precise about that. 8 weeks. I do not write this in anger. I write it because I believe you deserve to know the exact reason for every decision in this document. The way I always believed a property boundary deserved to be marked exactly and not approximately. In surveying, we call it establishing the true line. In a family, it goes by other names. The house was built well. I maintained it carefully. I hope the people it goes to find it useful. I love you. I have loved you since before you were born. That has not changed and will not change and is not the subject of this document. Your father, Clifford Marsh. My son calls on Sunday morning as scheduled. We talk for 20 minutes. He asks about my energy, my appetite, my sleep. He is warm and present for most of it. Then, with the regularity of a measurement taken at a fixed interval, he mentions that a house down the street from me apparently sold for considerably more than expected. Just interesting, he says. Just something he noticed online. Just the market, Dad, you know how it is. I look out my kitchen window at the birch trees. I know, I say. I do. My daughter came last Saturday with coffee and the groceries, and her youngest, who is 7, and who spent 40 minutes helping me in the garden, in a way that was more enthusiastic than useful, and more useful than she will know for some years yet. We planted the first bulbs of the season, tulip and crocus, along the south border of the garden, where my wife always put them. My granddaughter asked whether the flowers would remember where to come up every year. I said yes, they come back to the same spot. They don't need to be shown twice. She thought about this very seriously. I love that about children. They take the actual content of what you say seriously, before they learn to listen for what you meant instead. I looked at my daughter across the garden. She was crouching beside her daughter, pointing out where to press the bulb into the ground, and she had her mother's hands. I have noticed this for years, and it still catches me. And she was laughing at something her daughter said, and she was entirely, genuinely, lovably herself. I love her. That is not a complicated sentence. You can love someone completely, and still let the consequences be the consequences. You can love someone and grieve the version of them you needed and did not get. You can love someone and still refuse to rewrite what happened in room 214 as something other than what it was. The paperwork does not know about the Saturday visits. That is not cruelty. That is accuracy. She doesn't know. She thinks she has been earning her way back into something. In the human ways, in the father ways, she has. I have a daughter who shows up on Saturdays now. I have a son who calls on Sunday mornings. I have grandchildren who plant bulbs with me. These are real things. These have value. Harold has the other document. It is a Tuesday morning in April. I am in the garden. The tulip shoots have come up along the south border, small and green and definite, exactly where we put them. The Ottawa River light is doing what it does in April, arriving earlier each day, longer and warmer, filling up the yard by degrees. Chickadee is at the feeder my wife put up in 2011. Same feeder. Probably not the same chickadee. I have always thought there is something worth respecting about a chickadee. They do not go south. They stay through the Ontario winter, through everything, and they come back to the feeder on the first warm day as though nothing was ever in question. No drama, no announcement. Simply present, I refill my coffee. I go back to my garden. I am 71 years old. I had cancer surgery. I came home in a cab. I changed my will. I have had dinner with my children several times since, and they are good company in the ways that remain available to them, and I am grateful for what is available. They believe they are inheriting this house. They are inheriting Sunday mornings if they want them. They are inheriting roast dinners and Saturday gardening and a father who, in spite of everything, remains warm. That is what I have to give. It has always been what I had to give. They just did not always know to show up for it. The legal portion is Harold's department. The tulips are coming up right on schedule. The chickadee is at the feeder. The Ottawa River is somewhere beyond the tree line, running north the way it has run north for longer than any of us will be keeping records. And I am here, in my garden, in April, with my coffee and my measurements and my affairs in very precise order. I built this life carefully. I maintained it. I documented everything. When the time comes, Harold will open a file, make some calls, and everything will go exactly where I decided it should go, on a Tuesday in October, in my kitchen on Sycamore Crescent, with a walker and a pharmacy bag and 11 days of clear, accurate, unambiguous information about the people I raised. In surveying, we call that establishing the true line. My children will call it something else entirely. I will not be there to hear it. And on this April morning, with the tulips up and the chickadee at the feeder, and the river running where it has always run, that is the most settled thought I have had in a very long time.